it's very interesting in the sense that if you come to the academy, in fact, the first time I went there was at the start of this Kenopanis, but that's besides the point. When you go to the academy during this Upanishad time, it could be any Upanishad, but especially Kenopanis, all the students are chanting backwards and forward. Everyone's in a frequency, you know. And you hear the first part, and it's like music. Literally something happens, you know. And because and especially, I mean, not just the text, but Swamiji's delivery, and that gives you such a clear insight, such a clear understanding. What more is there? That's Brahman. And that's exactly what's happened here. Because the clarity with which the Guru is communicating this knowledge, the disciple thinks he's got it. The disciple almost feels as though he's hit the reality. Now, looking at all your faces, it doesn't look like anyone has hit the reality here. Anyway, the Guru obviously sees the look on the student's face. And this is where he starts the second part of the mantra. Because the student believes he knows it. He knows it well. If you think I know well, see, the teachers are so intuitive. When the intellect is that sharp and you're in touch with the reality, everything is so clear. It's amazing. You go speak with Swamiji, man, your whole world is a big problem. You can't see through it. It's like glazed. You go in a long story about this and that, and I don't know what to do. And within 3 minutes, put. Done. Everything is crystal clear. This assessment is amazing. These self-realized souls, the ability that they have to assess. And this is exactly what's happened here. He's assessed the look, just through the look. Maybe the student was beaming, you know. So just through that look, he knows. These guys they think they have it. They think they've got it. And this is where he clarifies. So he says, if you think I know well, this is talking about the disciple, right? If you think I know well, because that's the feeling by the look on the disciple, I know it. You know perhaps very little indeed. The form of Brahman you have known relates to that of gods. So it's just a very subtle, gentle way of bringing the disciple back to earth. Right? Because you cannot grasp Brahman by mere listening. You know, it doesn't matter how brilliant the lecture is. That's the absolute sense. The relative, it also applies. You cannot gain insight, gain concept just by listening. I've listened to something and I got it straight away, Craig. Not a problem. You can say that, of course. But to really grab a concept, it takes effort. It's about listening, you got it. You may say, well, I listened to it and I got it. That means you already had it. And you're just hearing it again in a different form. That's all. But just simply by hearing something, so many concepts we are covering in these lectures, but just by listening doesn't make you get it straight away. You have to do the work, reflection, reflection, reflection. Let it seep into your personality. Then you have that aha moment at some point, maybe a week later, a month later, a year later. So both relatively and absolutely. So again, he says here, you can't grasp Brahman just by listening. No matter how good that lecture was. He hasn't said all this. We are implying. Hey, doesn't matter what you just heard. Doesn't matter how good the lecture was. That is not Brahman. See, we always talk about knowledge of Brahman. The knowledge that is imparted in the Vedas, Vedanta. It's the knowledge of God. We are sitting here discussing, assimilating, absorbing the knowledge of God, as it were. But the knowledge of God, the knowledge of Brahman, the knowledge of self is not the self. And that he warns the spiritual aspirant against. He says, don't mistake that for the actual state of spiritual enlightenment. Two different things. If you think you know, well, I know well, you perhaps know very little indeed. The form of Brahman you have known relates to that of God's. Because the disciple, what's happened is he's obviously reveling, right? He's reveling in what's been heard. He's fully charged. You can imagine. Maybe you had the same experience when we were discussing the concept. Maybe when we were discussing the mantras last few weeks. Maybe you had a similar experience. Charged. It's invigorating, uplifting, enlightening a feeling you get. So the disciple has, and this is where he says, I'll get your clarification now, Jess. This is where he says, the form of Brahman you have known relates to that of God. So even the most brilliant expression of Brahman, God's here refers to the manifested powers of that one reality. See, everything that we are perceiving and feeling and thinking, the heart of that is still limited to the terrestrial world. So he calls that as God's. God's is different to, see, it's in plural, God's. Usually when they say God's, it's talking about the various manifestations of the reality, not the reality. So again, the form of Brahman you have known relates to that of God's. In fact, Brahman in its purest form is formless. It may sound like a contradiction in terms. And get used to it. A whole Upanishad is a contradiction in terms. Active form, formless. Brahman is formless, has no form. So what are we seeing? What are we experiencing? A reality with form. That is the gods. So the disciple is experiencing these manifest powers of Brahman, but not the unmanifest reality, Brahman. Yes, yes.
Craig, this thing of I know makes me think of, I can't think now where exactly we came across it, but I've come across it a couple of times. He who knows it, and he who doesn't know it also knows it. So, do you know the section that I'm talking about?
Yes.
Can you bring that into this? So I get unrealized who, no, I don't get it actually. But that in the context of this, the he who knows it, and he who doesn't know it also knows it. If I'm quoting that correctly. Can you clarify that in this context, please?
So he who knows it, knows it. He who doesn't know it also knows it. So when he says he who knows it, there's actually a pun on that word, and we're coming up to it. So we'll cover it again. It's worth covering. It's amazing concept. So he who knows it, knows it. What he's saying is, knows it in that context is, has experienced Brahman subjectively. So he knows it. I can't say he doesn't know it. He knows it. He's experienced it. So he who knows it, he who has experienced it subjectively, if we're going to put that sentence, he who knows it, in a slightly different wording. He who has experienced it subjectively experiences it. Right. Second part, so that he who knows it, knows it. He who doesn't know it also knows it. So he who doesn't know it objectively, because it's Brahman cannot be known through the intellect or mind. It cannot be known. So if it's not something that is experienced objectively, then it's something that's experienced subjectively. So he who doesn't know it also knows. So he doesn't know it objectively, but he knows it subjectively. So whether you know it or don't know it, you know it subjectively. Understands God. Now, what do you want to do? Put a chair. Where do you want to put that?
So the subjectively and objectively. So when you're saying someone who knows it subjectively, you mean a realized person who themselves has merged with the reality.
Correct.
By subjectively, you mean personally, it's happened to them, which is everyone.
It's that subjective experience. Correct.
And
exactly.
So then can you just run by the objectively one again? So the person who doesn't know it, so a non-realized person.
He who knows it, knows it. You understand that?
Yeah.
He who doesn't know it also knows it. That's what it says. He who doesn't know it also knows it. He who doesn't know it objectively knows it because he knows it subjectively. Because
so when say knows, could you substitute that with experience? Like you can't, he who doesn't know it doesn't experience it because you can't experience it.
Well, you become it. You see, it gets very difficult. Yes. This is where language breaks down. And they specifically do this. And it's good that you are approaching it this way. This is exactly how you meant to approach it. Because it's contradictions. It's saying one thing and then saying something the same but different, It almost appears as though they're trying to confuse you. But once you break it down and understand it, it's brilliant the way it's positioned. But it's not confusion. It's almost built-in reflection. They do it in such a way that really causes or creates that inquiry, that questioning within the shishya, the disciple, the student. You really got to think about it. So he who knows it subjectively, he experiences Brahman as a subjective experience, becomes it, as it were. He who doesn't know it In other words, because Brahman cannot be known, so understands, yes, I understand Brahman cannot be known, but I also experience it subjectively. I know that it can't be known, but that doesn't mean I'm not experiencing it.
Okay. And then this is almost like a third option, which is, I think I know, but I don't know. It's like a third.
Now the guru is saying, no, this is slightly different now. Now the guru is saying, you think you know, but you don't know. Just because you've had this this uplifting experience, it's still limited to a terrestrial realm because you think you've got it. He brings him down to earth. You haven't got it because it's not something you experience objectively. It's not in listening to the lecture that you can just realize. So in other words, remember, we broke it down. It's not a speech, it's not a pranas, it's not a mana, it's not the buddhi, it's not approachable. You got to see, don't worry. Again, in the third part, this whole concept, what we are trying to figure out now, this whole concept is presented as a story. And that's really, then these doubts that you're having should be cleared by then. Remember, the Upanishads is the 4 parts, right? Now, the first part is for a grade student. That guy is on the verge of realization. He just needs one tidbit almost from the guru. That's it. He's understood. He's got it. Gets up and leaves. And then the other guys are sitting there still struggling. I think I've got it. Yeah, no. I know what you were saying. Yeah, that's it. That's Brahman. He said, no. You haven't understood yet. You haven't understood. Understood in the sense you haven't got there. So the second grade student. So after the explanation of this second part, the second grade student awakens to that reality. He gets up and he goes. Third student is still sitting there. Yeah, what this guy's talking about. And then he gives a story, a narrative. So the narrative is given to, again, help elucidate the concept in a story. Fourth is just a practice. Still haven't got it, just do this.
Perhaps I might be in the double digits grade, somewhere below the 4. But that helps a lot. Thank you.
Consider even if you're double digits, it's fortunate. I don't know how many times I've done Kenopanis. Still, the whole thing is.
Okay, that helps a lot. Thank you.
All right. Yes, Karishma.
Craig, when you say he will experience it objectively, is that only in terms of the limited to the body, mind, and intellect?
Correct.
Okay.
So it's Brahman is packaged in the confines of the terrestrial realm. It's like the same as people believing God to speak to them, or having the perception of God, or I went to this service and I felt that God was there, and they may be genuine, but it reduces that all-encompassing reality into a limited terrestrial experience. It's if anything, it's unfair to do that to Brahman. Imagine you're this all-encompassing being, and then they say, no, but you belong in this particular place of worship today. It doesn't work like that. So yes, experiencing it objectively is through the perceptions, emotions, and thoughts. The equipments, in other words.
Okay, thank you.
And this is exactly what these guys have done. the disciples. They think they've got it because they have this objective comprehension. They have objectively understood. They've heard it. It's such a brilliant lecture. It makes so much sense. That is Brahman. I've got it. What more? Thank you, Guru. Namaskar. I got it. Thank you. You see, the Guru would be doing them a disservice if you just let them push off, thinking they have got it. And this is exactly why this mantra is brought about. It's a caution. It's a warning. Listen, what you think you've got is not it. You've still got some way to go. What you think you've got is nothing but the powers, the manifestations of that reality, not the reality. Tadeva brahmatvam vidhi nedam yadidam upasate. 5 times. Tadeva brahmatvam vidhi nedam yadidam upasate. Not that which you people worship. Not that. So again, it's remember, the Guru his only interest is to help the others they've come to him for guidance, assistance, to unveil the self. So he puts it in, he's there to, imagine he just said, okay, they think they got it, good luck. Push them, he would be doing them a disservice. So he kind of pitches it in a way like, okay, you guys haven't quite got it. You may think you've got it. You may think you know it well. But actually, what you've got is relating to Brahman as a form. See, the way Brahman is described sometimes is Brahman in that form, or as Brahman manifest. Then Brahman is also described as Brahman as formless, or Brahman as unmanifest. You may say, or I may ask you, which is it? You may say, well, I'm not sure. What are you talking about? Manifest Brahman or unmanifest Brahman? Which is it? What do you mean, which is it? Well, what is Brahman? You see, for those of us, or for all of us, yeah, the manifest Brahman, yes, we start tuning our thoughts, our feelings, our actions towards the self within. We engage in the spiritual pursuit towards spiritual unfoldment. Right, we're working towards that. We're trying to get closer to Brahman. For us, or for those who manage to lift themselves up to that point, they start seeing Brahman as manifested. Yeah, you know, sometimes maybe you've experienced something like this. I don't know. It's the closest I can. It's not it, but it's the closest I can. You know, when sometimes you go for a walk in nature, you know, in like quite isolation, you're just out there in nature, and there's a certain awe about being there. You know, you experience it can be like a sense of oneness. It's like nature is just all encompassing, all beautiful, and I'm a part of that nature. This whole manifestation, I'm a part of that manifestation. And you may think that is God. I'm not saying you've had this experience, but I'm trying to convey it in terms that perhaps you can relate to. So you're in nature, you're walking, and you're far away from civilization, and you just get that feeling. In fact, that's why many people do it, because it gives you that feeling. Some people, they go swim in the ocean and they're just surrounded by that water and they have that feeling too. And I mean, it's, you know, if you into that frequency, it can manifest in any way. So those of us, or all of us that are in this terrestrial experience, can only acknowledge Brahman through the manifestations. The simple example is an illiterate person from the jungles, right? They never seen civilization, right? And you bring them out of the jungle and you bring them to the city. And somehow you manage to, you got a translator and can communicate with them. And they come to your home and they are amazed by all that's what's happening. And they're pointing, you know, to the different things. They're pointing to the light. They're pointing to the fan. They, you know, all of these things, the stove. And they ask, like, how does this function? What makes all these things work? Yeah, no, it's electricity. So how do you explain electricity to an illiterate person? See, it's very difficult to explain electricity to an illiterate person. Try to explain it to very difficult to explain to an illiterate person, even difficult to explain to a literate person. So how do we explain electricity to an illiterate person? We can't. The only thing we can do is show him the manifestations of electricity. See, over here, you see this functioning. And over here, and you open the fridge and it's cool. The electricity makes the fridge cold. You take him to the fan. The electricity, you plug it in the wall and it spins. So you show this guy all these different manifestations of electricity. In that way, hoping he gets an idea of what that unmanifest electricity is. It's a similar principle. So this form and formless, manifest, unmanifest. So what they're talking about gods is that manifest power. The spinning fan, the cooling cooler, the heating heater, not the electricity. That they don't know. That's what he's bringing our attention to. It's not these manifestations. Therefore, now, therefore, know that which is to be known, I think, is still to be ascertained by you. Therefore, now that which is to be known, I think, is still to be ascertained by you. See, it's the Guru is always encouraging and coming back. You see, after delivery of the opening part, those initial 9 mantras, as I said, the disciple is on a high. You see, what you have to appreciate, you get into this frequency, and what happens is the mind gets elevated. It gets elevated. Remember, there's a sincere sense of surrender. The disciple is completely surrendered to the Guru, saying, I don't know the answer. I don't know what that Brahman is. Please teach me Brahma Vidya. Give me knowledge of the self. I'm surrendering to you. That surrender helps the student, and we've talked about this, that surrender helps the student reach this, they call it acme of devotion. It's almost it's not 100% devotion, a 99.9% devotion. The mind is elevated to such a level. Similarly with the intellect, because the presentation of the knowledge is so profound. It's so profound that the intellect goes through this brilliant exposition of logic and reason and goes all the way to the highest human thought. Remember, the Upanishads are said to be the highest known thoughts presented to humanity. The intellect has been taken through that presentation and has got to a zenith, along with the mind's devotion, has reached this peak. It's there. The zenith of terrestrial experience. Still on the periphery. Still not quite the experience. And that's where the confusion comes. That's where the confusion lies. You find it happening. In some cultures and some traditions, you find these religious aspirants. They get into what is called a trance through whatever practice they undertake. Their mind goes, I'm not saying dizzy, but they get into that pure frequency of devotion. They get into a trance, as it were. In the Christian faith, they call it as talking in tongues. They get into this trance state, trance-like state. See, this is where this mantra is needed. That's not it. No matter how high the mind takes you to that point, it's still the mind. The mind cannot experience Brahman. No matter what profound understanding you get from the Upanishads. Upanishads, you can chant backwards, forwards, you've understood it to its core. Boop. That's not it. That's still not it. In a way, he's popping the bubble. He's popping the bubble, popping your bubble. You guys think you understood, but you actually know very little. See, what is the whole world's knowledge? The whole world's understanding? The whole world's everything. Just a pinprick in Brahman. Nothing. Now you're talking about your understanding. What do you know? What do any of us know? Nothing. So the Guru sees the disciple going all the way up. Come back down. No, he's not doing it the Guru is not doing it in a sense to discourage the student. You must appreciate that. He's not in any way discouraging the student. As I said, it would be a disservice if he let the student push off after that without further cautioning him. That which you're experiencing is still limited to the confines of your terrestrial realm of experience, because it's still the mind and intellect that is driving that experience. However lofty, however high it is, it's still limited. The self is beyond that. Get to that. Get to that self that lies beyond the body, beyond the mind, beyond the intellect. That's where the reality lies. So as we appreciate, you will have to transcend these limitations. And they are limitations. As well as being tools, they are also limitations. Tools in the sense that's the only arsenal we have, as it were, to try and get there. We've only got these tools, body, mind, intellect. That's kind of what the human personality is. We've only got these three faculties available to us to reach enlightenment. But to get to enlightenment, we have to leave them behind. Again, it's that age-old example that you've heard many, many times. Pole vaulter. Pole vaulter is running up. Runs up to the bar. Plugs the pole. Hoists himself up. Now what does he have to do? If he wants to get over this bar, he's got to drop the pole. Over he goes. Right. The bar is up here high. He can't, without a pole, he'll never get up there. No chance. Not a high jump. So the pole vaulter cannot cross the bar without a pole. Impossible. Neither can he cross the bar with a pole. Also impossible. So you got to use your mind and intellect, of course, body, mind, and intellect, karma, bhakti, jnana, spiritual disciplines to get you up to that point. Eventually, you have to leave them behind. When that association with the equipments, the limiting equipments, is dissolved, disbanded, dismembered, what is left is the self. That self you are. So we use the equipments to get up to that point, knowing full well that that point still has to be crossed. Now that's the point that the disciple has reached here and thinks, I'm up here. Still got to cross over. Still got to cross over the bar. That experience that you're experiencing is still an objective experience of the reality. You're still reveling in that manifestation of Brahman. See, at that point, the manifestation of Brahman is, I don't know, maybe like a drug or something. What do they call it? Ecstasy. Maybe like an ecstasy. You get to that heart, you know, thing. No, I'm not saying you guys should start taking drugs. He gets to that dizzying heart. It's not that. This is Swamiji tells the story. He had some relatives, and this is exactly the practice. This was when he was very young, and these women used to get together. This is not only done by women. See, men also do this. And they used to sit around and they used to, with these Vedic chants and mantras, and you can imagine a huti is going and the fire and the incense, and it drives a sort of, it drives you into that state. And they all start trancing out. And this one lady in particular, fully trancing out. Father walked into the room, Quata, give her one whack. What is this nonsense going on here? What is the nonsense going on? It's an example to highlight this point. What is this? Abuse. This is to highlight this idea. It's not that. Don't get caught up in that, because it's a big risk. You can get caught up in all of these practices. You get caught up in spirituality itself. That's the worst place to get caught, in spirituality itself. You may say, why do you say that? Because that'll hold you there hardest and fastest. It'll keep you there. You get caught up in spirituality, good luck moving out of that. So again, these guys are too sharp. Don't get caught there. What are you doing there? Keep moving. Leave that limitation behind. Move on to the reality. Drop the mind and intellect. See, this is, you know, why you go to any temple, or even in India, you don't need to just go to temple. In India, what do you do before you go into somebody's home even there? Yeah, you take your shoes off. You take your shoes off. So the representative, when you go into any place of worship, I've been to, nowadays that culture has been lost. Walking with muddy shoes, no problem. Everyone's welcome. Anyway, In the Orthodox temples, especially in India, you take off your shoes. It's symbolic. It's symbolic of this idea that, you see, what are your shoes? Your shoes are helping you get from one place to the next, right? Your shoes are taking you. You have to walk from your car to the temple, or you have to walk from your home to the temple, and from the temple to the shops, and from the shop in your shoes. You don't go without shoes. Anybody, maybe the guys that are practicing earthing or something, they go without shoes. But generally speaking, you'll go with your shoes here and there and everywhere. So your shoes carry you from experience to experience, right? Why is everyone looking at me like I'm crazy? Or they don't understand what I'm saying? Your shoes carry you from place to place. Everyone understand? Okay, good. Similarly, your mind and intellect carry you from experience to experience. That's driving your experiences, your mind and intellect. So what's this analogy? What's this taking your shoes off? What is it symbolic of? See, when you go to a place of God, let's call it a temple, a church, a mosque, whatever it is, the implication is you leave your shoes at the door. You leave your mind and intellect behind, and you communicate with God. You're in touch with God, as it were. It's a reminder. It's a symbolic. See, why do this? Wherever you can plant these reminders are very, very useful, because the mind is all over the show. So you plant these reminders. This is a good practice. Not even from a spiritual point of view, a hygiene point of view. Oh, you've been walking around the city or walking around a shopping center in the car park, and what is on the ground? Shoes. Now you're going to come home and walk that into your home? Even if you don't understand it spiritually, at least practice it from a hygiene level. And then maybe it'll start filtering through. No, I'm not saying do whatever you guys like, but either makes sense or it doesn't. Anyway, so this is the practice, and this is what it is symbolic of. Take your mind from your worldly experiences, put it there. Put it on the reality for which you'll have to leave that mind and intellect behind. This is a state of spiritual enlightenment. When you drop that last thread of identification with the faculties, the limited faculties of your body, mind, and intellect, that is when you are able to merge with the pure consciousness, the supreme God, as it were. Everyone okay? Questions? Okay.
Naham manye suvedeti no na vedeti vedacha Yonas tadveda no na vedeti vedacha.
I do not think I know well. Not that I do not know. I know for certain. Excuse me. I do not think I know well. Not that I do not know. I know for certain. Sorry, it feels like a bug or something. I know for certain. He among us who knows that, he among us who does not know thus also knows. So here we go, Jess. You're clearly reading ahead here. Jess is, if you are all disappointed, Jess is spoiler alert for this evening. Spoiler alert. Next time Jess has a question, we are going to ask her if she's not read ahead for spoiler alerts. So, luckily, we've had a prelude to this. I do not think I know well. See, one of the disciples here. This is the disciple now speaking. One of the disciples. See, the Guru's just cautioned, right? That we understood. He's just said, if you think you know, you don't know. Because it's not objective experience, it's a subjective apprehension of the reality. So in the first mantra, the Guru has cautioned this. Now here, a disciple, having heard what the Guru said, is attempting to relay his experience of enlightenment. And that's why it appears so confusing. And respectively, he says here, he submits he has attained the transcendental state beyond the mind and intellect. That essentially he's saying, I've realized, and now he's trying to communicate that. I do not think I know well, because it's beyond knowing. Not that I do not know. It's not that I don't know it. It's not that I'm not apprehending it. I know it for certain. He among us who knows that, the reality, knows that, apprehends the reality. He among us who does not know thus also knows. So lucky we've explained this to an extent. We're still going to cover it. So he's the disciple now is saying, I've reached Brahman, I've attained that state. And he tries to give this account of his experience. I mean, you may say, well, it's very confusing. Surely if he had attained that state, it would have been a little bit clearer as to what he's saying, because he knows, he doesn't know, he knows for certain, yet he doesn't know for certain. Come on, what is it, man? Surely if you got there, you can explain it. And again, this is where the language breaks down. See, even subtle concepts, mathematics, the famous E equals mc squared. To communicate that in words, you'll need pages and pages. So that's why they use symbols, right? Mathematics, subtle language, as it were. The language of mathematics is in symbols. So again, it's the same problem they got here. Now they're trying to communicate through words. That too, that was Sanskrit at that time, which is lends itself for ease of communication with very little scope for misunderstanding. The language itself is mathematically constructed, in fact. Now we've got taken that and put into English. You can appreciate the difficulty. How long it must have taken just to do the transliteration and translation of these verses. Very, very challenging. So, nonetheless, the disciple now is conveying his experience. He, by all means, starts by saying, I do not think I know well. Because imagine he starts and says, aha, I know well. What's the guru going to turn around and say? You think you know. All right, the previous verse. If you think I know well. So he can't get away with that opening line. No, but I know well. I know very well. You can't get away with it. So you got to wiggle around it. So then he says, okay, you're right. Okay. You're right, Mr. Guru. I do not think I know well. So he takes care of that part of the Guru's caution. See, you can see the sharpness of the student here. See, yes, I do not think I know well. Because if he says I know well, out. So I do not think I know well. But then straight away he corrects himself and he says, not that I do not know. Not that I do not know. In other words, it's not that I know it from an objective comprehension. I'm not comprehending the reality through my equipments. Not that I do not know it. And it's also not that I am not experiencing it. Not that I do not know it. I know for certain. Guaranteed. Money back guarantee. I know it. I know it for certain. Actually, this takes an extreme amount of application to try and figure out. You see that this is, if you read this verse as it is, which is a lot of Western philosophers have commentated on the Upanishads, saying it is the blabberings of humanity in early childhood. Anyway, if someone starts talking like this, you think this guy's off his rocker. He's off his rocker. He's gone completely off. And these great Western philosophers said, it's the blabberings of humanity in early childhood. It doesn't make any sense. Again, as I mentioned in the beginning of the class, it's purposefully done like this. It's purposefully constructed, these contradicting, perplexing, confusing, as it were, ways of communication are done specifically to make you think. That's it. See the example he gives actually in the textbook. He says there, okay, imagine I'm just going to read out from here. The disciple makes a perplexing statement because of his difficulty in expressing his spiritual experience. A similar problem would arise even if one has to express one's physical identity. This is the example. Imagine a person who has lost his personal identity. Right? You lost your memory. You don't know who you are. Right? Lost his memory, his parentage, his name, everything about him. And one day he regains his memory. How would he now express the discovery of his own self? He has just regained cognition of his identity. He cannot say he knows himself as his self is not apart from him. It's like saying, no, I know who I am. Yeah, sure you do, buddy. Because his self is not apart from him. He cannot say he knows himself as his self is not apart from him. Neither can he say he does not know himself. But he can say, no, I don't know myself, because he knows himself. But he can't say I know myself because the self is himself. Of course he knows himself now. He would stammer thus because his experience is not an objective cognition. It is a subjective apprehension. So that example is given in the book to help you understand the idea, this idea. It's exactly the same principle. You've lost cognition of your reality, of the truth, of your real self. You've lost it. We've lost it. We don't know who we are. Now, one fun day, after many Wednesday evening classes, eventually the penny drops. And there we have it. We recognize the truth, the reality. We cognize the self. Now, how do you explain that? No, I know who I am. It's not that I don't know who I am. I am who I am. You appreciate it. It's like blabbering when you say you don't know that you're not you, but you are you, but you is not separate from you. You understand? If you don't understand, go back to the example. So again, he's just struggling to express that. Words break down. It's this whole idea again of trying to communicate between states. He's obviously reached that transcendental state, that fourth state, and now he's having difficulty in communicating that experience. Okay, we will pick it up again next week. We'll touch on it and then move into the next. There's 5 mantras in this second part, and then it's smooth sailing after that. Stories we get to listen to, which conveys the same concept. So by the end of it, we should all know exactly what it is. Not that you should not know what it is. Hari Om.